Alright, so welcome back, Astro Bros subscribers, to another video on the Lunar Mansion or Nakshatra series. If you missed my other videos in this series, and this is the first one you're watching, a nakshatra is the number of degrees that the moon transits in one day. So in 24 hours, the moon moves one nakshatra. The moon is roughly on a 27-day loop, and there are 27 nakshatras spanning the 30-degree zodiac, which is comprised, or 360-degree zodiac, which is comprised of 12 signs of 30 degrees each. Each of these signs have their own planetary rulers, and some of them have co-rulers. What is less known is that each of these lunar stations, these 27 nakshatras, have their own co-rulers and their own particular vibe, and the co-rulers of the lunar mansions interact with the rulers and co-rulers of these signs in a way that allows you to observe why, let's say, two people are born in the sign of Taurus, one person's born at the beginning, one person's born at the end, and they have one underlying vein of similar interests, but they have another difference that can be hard to explain without this nakshatra series. So it allows you to make more specific predictions and understand yourself, other people, and the world in general better. So, with that being said, this video is on the lunar mansion of, it's called in Vedic astrology Aradra, and it's called in Western astrology, it's just called I believe it's the sixth lunar mansion. Hold on, let me make sure that's right. Yes, 6. Okay, sorry about that. But yeah, this one it has a co-ruler of North Node, the North Node of the Moon. And it falls exclusively in the sign of Gemini from 6.4 degrees Gemini, which translates to 6 2/3 degree Gemini. Each lunar mansion is 13 1/3. So when I say 6.4 degrees Gemini, it's 40 minutes on an hour. So it's 2/3 of an hour. It's an easier way of measuring the degrees than saying 6 hat, or 66666 or whatever degrees. It's just 6.4 degrees Gemini to 20 degrees Gemini spans the length of this lunar mansion. And like I said, this lunar mansion is ruled by the North Node of the Moon, or in Vedic astrology, Rahu, or in the sort of Western astronomy, like physics type view of things, it's called the ascending node, and certain websites will use the ascending node. This body, it represents a particular point on the moon's orbit where the moon is closest to Earth. It has an energy that is sort of animalistic, sort of short-sighted in a sense. Rahu is often called the head of the dragon in occult mysticism, and the reason for this is that it basically operates like the head of a snake, in that a snake doesn't really think, it just goes after what it wants. So, the snake is just sitting there and it sees something it wants and it snatches out to grab it sort of unconsciously. And because of that, Rahu is a very sort of unconscious, impulse-driven, status-driven, primal urge-driven, dominance-driven energy. Not unlike Mars, but even less calculated than Mars. So you can think of how Mars is the warrior that wants to compete and win games and get the gold, get the girl, get what it wants, conquer everything. Rahu is like that, except it really has no overarching purpose other than just to survive. So whereas Mars' goal is to win a competition, a sport game, a challenge, get into a relationship before somebody else, any competition. Rahu is really more just like, I want food, I want attention, and I want recognition, like status or whatever. And that basically sums up the Rahu energy. So you put this over the sign of Gemini. The sign of Gemini is about your communication abilities. It's about how you speak, the word choice you use, how you write. It's also about adding to your storehouse of wealth. So if Taurus is your savings account, let's say, Gemini is the actions you take to add to that savings account because it's second from second. It's Taurus is the second sign. Gemini is the next one right after Taurus. So it represents gains of material things, which makes sense because if you think about what a business person or a salesperson or communicator is trying to do, ultimately they're trying to make clever deals in a way that benefits them disproportionately with their language, with their ability to write, with their ability to cleverly trade and possibly deceive the people around them to get what they need. So that is the sign of Gemini. So the previous nakshatra was half in Taurus and half in Gemini. And for the Gemini part of it, it was co-ruled by Mars, and it was represented by a male deer. And the reason for that is when you mix the energy of Mars and the energy of Gemini, you get a very sort of aggressive, impulse-driven, clever communicator and fighter who is basically marauding around, dealing with people, talking to people, trying to understand people's point of view, but they might just live in the woods. They're not super stable. They're just going around and trying to communicate and trade and sell and just make their way in the world and survive. This nakshatra is a little more mature version of Gemini, except that the energy of the North Node, while it is intelligent and clever and drives them to constantly be trying to sell things, constantly be making sort of business decisions, and it's all very fast paced. So they're not necessarily going to make the most moral decisions. So the things you can see from here, you can see a street musician on the good end. If it's in an intelligent house, you can see a drug dealer on the bad end. Probably on the best end, you can see a person who is selling some sort of novelty item, just a salesperson. Because the North Node of the Moon, it is impulsive, but it is very intelligent. It has the capacity to organize itself. So, best case scenario, these people are salespeople. These people are, communicators, negotiators, this kind of thing. Worst case scenario, the immoral energy of the North Node takes over, and you get somebody who is a drug dealer, who is a person who's selling headphones on a train or something, just trying to survive day by day. So it really depends on where the North Node is placed. You want to look at conjunctions to the North Node. You want to look at the sign and house of the North Node in your chart and figure out, what exactly you're going to be selling or communicating about. You also want to look at the particular planet in this nakshatra. So if Jupiter's here, this person can be like a Joel Osteen style preacher, like a prosperity preacher who is selling religion to people, literally. If you get Mars here, this person can be a weapons salesperson, a person who's selling guns, person who's selling knives, that kind of thing. If you get this in the fifth house, you can get a person who's selling music, like a street musician or something. So all of these things, they, like every nakshatra, it ranges in its effects from good to bad. Now, there is a special aspect about this nakshatra that, like all of them, they have their own little particular quirks that aren't necessarily represented in the sign itself or the co-ruler itself. So this nakshatra is ruled by, in the Vedic system, it's ruled by the deity Shiva. It's one of, I believe, 4 nakshatras ruled by Shiva. And the nakshatras of Shiva have a very particular style to them, in that Shiva is the most powerful god, but he is also an outcast who lives in the forest. So even though he's the most powerful and the most intelligent deity in Hinduism, and all the gods look up to him, he's also a total outcast who's not necessarily welcome at any of the meetings. So you can get people who are hyper competent, but not necessarily in a socially acceptable way. If you have a lot of planets in this nakshatra, these people are constantly violating social norms, and they are constantly often going against the grain, going against society. You know, if you have your sun sign here, you might disappoint your your father in some way, just like you would if you had North Node conjunct the sun. Also, the symbolism of this nakshatra, in the same way that the last one was symbolized by a male deer, this nakshatra is symbolized by a storm, a tornado, a thunderstorm, a hurricane. Like, you imagine you're like hiding in a tent and the wind is beating you, and you're just sort of trying to weather the storm out and like get to the other side of it. And that's honestly because the energy of Shiva is a destructive energy, even without the Vedic notion that this nakshatra is ruled by Shiva. If you put the North Node and Gemini together, you get a very chaotic, sort of like fast-paced, but not necessarily very well thought out energy. And these people have to learn to use their communication to survive. That is their lesson. And the ultimate goal of this nakshatra, if you combine these two energies, the composite sort of vibration of these two energies is the moon. So, like I said in my previous videos, I will release a video eventually on how to get that sort of composite information out of the nakshatra or conjunctions or anything like that. But for now, just take my word for it. I'll release it later. But yeah, so the moon, which represents, if you remember my video on Cancer, it represents security, happiness, emotional sort of happiness, as opposed to Taurus, which is just pleasure. So these people's ultimate goal in life is to use their ability to think and communicate and manifest to get out of that storm of their life and find peace. And, depending on which planet there is in this nakshatra, if you have Saturn here, these people are going to be dealing with storms, metaphorically and literally speaking, for probably the first 30 years of their life. If you have Jupiter here, the amount of time it takes you to get out of that storm in your life is going to probably be dependent on you finding a teacher to instruct you on how to get through this. If you have Sun in this nakshatra, it's probably going to be faster for you than if Saturn, but again, you've got to look at the whole chart. You've got to look at conjunctions. You've got to look at the house placement, etc. So this being said, let's just sum up. This nakshatra is about sales, communication, and survival. And the ultimate goal of this nakshatra is to use your ability to communicate, to weather life's storms, and provide some sort of security and stability for yourself. And depending on the choices you make and the placements you have, this will either be easy or hard for you to get out of that storm and find some sort of tranquility in your life. So, the next one is going to be the Punarvasu nakshatra, and I will get back to you on that later. But for now, appreciate that video, and have a good day.